Rode to the White House with Daryl Morris. Very smart and a great guy. I met all his family. It's amazing. On Weekend Early Breakfast on Talk Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. He's not wrong either. He's not wrong. Okay, time to hop back onto our election coverage, our US election coverage. Thanks to Betfair on Talk Radio all this month, and bring in Edward Hardy from the Hardy Report. Greg Swenson as well from Republicans Overseas. Gentlemen, good morning to you both.
Good morning, Daryl.
Good morning, guys.
Morning. Boy, oh boy, I mean, it feels like quite the morning, doesn't it, to be coming together for a discussion about this. So US President Donald Trump last night airlifted to hospital, effectively, or taken to a military hospital via a helicopter, if airlifted to hospital maybe is too dramatic a term. Feeling feverish, mildish symptoms of coronavirus. We do have a clip from Donald Trump posted a couple of hours ago to Twitter, where he obviously aimed to sort of reassure the nation and the world, I guess, that he was in relative good health. This is him speaking a couple of hours ago.
I want to thank everybody for the tremendous support. I'm going to Walter Reed Hospital. I think I'm doing very well, but we're going to make sure that things work out. The First Lady is doing very well. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will never forget it. Thank you.
He looks okay. He's suited and booted. He sounds relatively well, or as well as can be, I suppose, with this diagnosis. Guys, I want you to take your partisan hats off for a second and get into some of the questions of what's really going on here and what it means constitutionally before we move on to the election. Greg, if I can start with you, because I think that this question is really, really important. What is the difference between the care that he can get at the White House and the care that he can get at the military hospital?
Well, Walter Reed has historically been the president's hospital, or the presidential hospital. So he basically has an office set up there. That's how long or how significant the history is of Walter Reed. So it doesn't surprise me. It's probably just a lot more efficient for everybody involved, including the healthcare people that want to look after him. It's just probably a lot more efficient and safe for them to be at Walter Reed.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem to be a crisis thing where he was rushed off in an ambulance or something.
Sure.
Okay. It seems to be pretty precautionary in nature.
Yeah, that would line with that line that we're getting out of the White House about it being precautionary. Ed, constitutionally, what happens if his condition worsens and he can't serve? What happens next?
Well, Mike, firstly, can we say, regardless of political differences, I'm sure we all wish the president and the First Lady as well, we have to remember that she's been diagnosed with coronavirus, a speedy recovery, and I'm sure we hope that they do recover from this swiftly and he's back on the campaign trail or he's back in office soon. But the reality of the situation is, or the way that we look at this, is that Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, has been found that he doesn't have coronavirus. Karen Pence doesn't have coronavirus. So obviously if Donald Trump is incapacitated through this virus, it doesn't sound like he is at the moment, but if he did become that way, we saw how quickly things changed with Boris Johnson, Mike Pence would be able to step into office at the moment. In the event that Mike Pence became incapacitated, it would then go to the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who would take over. And that is the current sort of chain of succession. Again, Nancy Pelosi does not seem to have, she does not have the virus at the moment either. So there is still the chain of succession that is in process.
Sure. So that's how that protocol works.
Donald Trump wasn't able to fulfill his duty.
And Edward, just on the issue of the election as well, then, what protocols are put in place now, and what precedents are there for a situation like this happening 4 weeks from an election? If his condition does worsen, does it throw the election in doubt, or does American democracy plough on regardless?
There isn't really a precedent for this of a presidential candidate being unable to campaign 4 weeks from the election in a situation like this where they are being taken off the campaign trail. Not certainly in recent history. there isn't. So right now, it looks like, firstly, the second presidential debate most likely will not be able to go ahead, purely because the time frame that Donald Trump will need to isolate for would make that incredibly difficult to occur unless it went into some sort of digital platform, but no one seems to be suggesting that yet. But Mike Pence is going to continue with the VP debate. It sounds like that should go ahead. And the Trump campaign has made it clear that they will go digital now, as the Joe Biden campaign is doing. In fact, as the Trump campaign mocks the Joe Biden campaign for doing for a lot of this election, the Trump campaign is now going to go digital, it sounds like, and hold their events in that way, which is a lot safer, particularly in the middle of a global pandemic.
Sure. So it will, if not necessarily change the timing of the election, it will certainly change the dynamic of the election. It does feel slightly crass as well at this point, doesn't it, to make political calculations while a man is unwell. But I don't think that we can underestimate actually just how much this matters to the voters. The health of a candidate matters to the voters. Greg, I want to play you what happened when Trump took to the stage during a rally in 2016, shortly after his then adversary, Hillary Clinton, was struck down with pneumonia, a relatively similar situation, to be fair, of a respiratory illness, I suppose, literally. There's a little bit of a gap here as well in where Trump is speaking, and I just want you to know, if you're listening to this, that that is him mimicking her struggling to walk in a car. So that's how sort of pointed his attack was on Hillary Clinton. This is him in 2016.
But here's a woman. She's supposed to fight all of these different things, and she can't make it 15 feet to her car. Give me a break. Give me a break. Give me a break. She's home resting right now. She's getting ready for her next speech, which is going to be about 15 minutes, and it's going to be in 2 or 3 days.
So that was literally on the 2nd of October 2016, 4 years later, and he finds himself in a relatively similar situation. For better or worse, rightly or wrongly, Greg, I wonder if people are grappling this weekend with this question. Should people feel sympathy for a man who hasn't shown sympathy himself?
Well, if you want to look at that one event in 2016, I guess if you want to say, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, yeah, I suppose. But it just doesn't seem like apples and apples. I mean, 2016 was a long time ago. It was you obviously know the point he was trying to make, that Hillary was not up to the job. She had been suffering quite a bit of suffering exhaustion. And so I don't think he was, sort of picking on someone's handicap or something cruel like that. He was trying to point out that her exhaustion should have been an issue. I think testing positive for COVID is not an issue in terms of someone's capability or fitness to do the job. But that was an issue in 2016. Okay. It turns out, in retrospect, her campaign staffers were making points of it. It's just that it wasn't obvious until she stumbled.
But you can understand though, can't you, Greg, why people would perhaps not necessarily feel all that concerned about sympathising with the president when clearly he didn't at that time.
You know what? I'm not sure people will do the research that you've done, Daryl, which is great, which is brilliant. But I think they'll think more. They're more likely to think about what he's done in the last year. And you've heard all the critics talk about, he hasn't taken COVID seriously, and this is what happens when you don't wear masks. And, there's going to be some of that, but there'll also be some sympathy. Remember, people hated Ronald Reagan as much as they hate Trump. I mean, hating a Republican president is not new. They hated Ronald Reagan. When he took a bullet in 1981, very early in his presidency in April of 81, there was downright sympathy for him. So it's amazing how these things can change. So it's hard to predict. I don't have the crystal ball, sure. But I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, sure. Ed, is that a concern for you and for your side of the argument that we see here, a swell of support for the president? We saw it on relatively similar terms with Boris Johnson. It didn't last here in the United Kingdom, of course, but there was a swell of support and the country fell quite neatly behind him. Could that happen?
Well, in the UK, we have to remember that swell of support has washed away. And to be fair, it washed away rather quickly after Boris Johnson recovered. People weren't supporting his political approach when he fell ill. They were supporting him as an individual and wishing him well. And people will take that approach with Donald Trump, as any human would want people to recover quickly from this virus. But the situation that we're looking at here is that on the matter of coronavirus, Donald Trump arrogantly and irresponsibly played down the threat of a deadly virus and has now tested positive for that virus. If we look at world leaders who have contracted coronavirus, Bolsonaro in Brazil, Johnson in the UK, and Trump now in America, all three of them played down the threat of coronavirus. All three of them got the virus. That's not a coincidence. And as we see by the Trump campaign saying we're going to go and hold rallies in the digital space, they should have been doing this all along. And the fact that they mocked the Biden campaign for following the CDC's guidance on the way that people should be acting in the middle of a global pandemic.
Okay.
Reflects the fact.
Yeah, and what you're making there, Ed, is not wholly personal, but it's a pretty pointed attack on Donald Trump personally and his handling of the virus. Are we now likely to see much less of that from Joe Biden, in as much as he has, as we know this morning, removed his personal attack ads for the time being, suspended them for the time being? What does that leave with Biden to campaign on if there is now a wall of protection around Donald Trump on his personal matters and his personal handling of the virus? Doesn't leave Biden very much more to say, does it?
I think it's possible to take out the personal element of attacks on Donald Trump's character and look at the political issues that have existed and continue to talk about them, because they are important and the two can be separated. You can continue to make political arguments against the Trump presidency while also being a human in a situation where someone is suffering. But you have to look at what Donald Trump has said, even in the last 10 days or so. On the 22nd of September, he said it affects virtually nobody after over 200,000 Americans died from the virus. So Joe Biden can still talk about this issue and this failed handling. And the reality is that not having masks, not wearing protective equipment that you should do, that the Trump administration has recommended individuals do.
Yeah, I think it's undoubtable, isn't it, Edward? That
you can still acknowledge that while also being human in this response.
It is undoubtable, isn't it, that there is a stark difference now growing between the president and Biden, and I think that this just makes that difference starker, doesn't it, Greg? In as much as Joe Biden, Trump has mocked Joe Biden literally on Tuesday. Trump mocked Joe Biden for not wearing a mask, and now here we are with Trump testing positive, and it seems getting quite ill. Do you think that we are likely to see a different Donald Trump emerge from the other end of this? There isn't very long to go before the election, by the way, so it might not make very much of a difference, to be honest, and quite a number of Americans have already cast their ballot. But do you think that we will see, as we perhaps saw with Johnson, a softened edge to Trump? Do you think this is a sort of major life event that perhaps he needs to jolt his attention into the right places?
Possibility, Darryl, and I think Ed brings up some good points that this could change the president's outlook, but I really doubt it. Okay, this is President Trump we're talking about. He's a man of the people. If anything, he will say, "Hey, I got this thing. A lot of people in the country have come down with the virus." He, in spite of his optimism and his argument that people in the country should carry on, keep calm and carry on. He's never suggested that he's immune to this or anybody else is immune to it. He's not suggesting that. He's suggesting that you have to balance the ability for the country to recover with addressing the virus, protect the vulnerable, protect the most vulnerable, those with comorbidities. The CDC, who the progressive radical left have made into the new Jesus, has said 2 weeks ago that only 6% of the victims in the U.S. Died directly from the coronavirus, but the other 94% died from comorbidities. The average comorbidity rate is 2.7.
He has used language about. He has used language like referring to it as a hoax. He himself has said that he wanted to sort of play down the seriousness. In speaking to the journalist Bob Woodward very famously recently, he said that he did attempt to play down the virus. Now, whether he did that for noble reasons or because of carelessness is up for debate another day. But I wonder if he will now be lying in his hospital bed in Washington thinking, I've got this wrong, I've made a mistake here, and I can feel it now personally, I can feel it myself.
I doubt it. This president is a fighter. He's, if anything, this just makes him more connected to the regular, average American that's not hiding in the basement, that's not hiding at the house in the Hamptons or the house in Nantucket. He's just went out there and did his thing and said, "Let's get back to business. Let's get back to work."
And it's cost
I'm
him
go
quite badly. It cost him quite badly, though, hasn't it? Because
Well,
he's got very ill. And there's also a string of appearances.
Possibly, but that's a risk. That's a risk he's willing to take.
And just on the issue of the personal attacks from Biden as well, Greg, because Trump is now effectively protected from the harshest of those for a little while, it seems. But it does plant the focus of the conversation in America squarely on coronavirus. I mean, it doesn't just come with support and sympathy. It comes with, as we've been discussing this morning, great questions about Donald Trump's handling. That's an area that we know Donald Trump frankly doesn't poll well on. It is an area that he doesn't want the election campaign to be focused on. And so will he be also lying in that hospital bed thinking, actually, this has taken the campaign in a direction that I was desperately trying to pull it away from?
I doubt it. I mean, it's I was talking about this yesterday on media appearances. It definitely brings the subject back. But if the president turns it into a positive, which I think he will, he's able to message better. He's obviously got all the attention that he wants. If he messages better, look, his biggest failures on corona were the press conferences in March and April, not his actual policies. Governor Cuomo did a great job with these press conferences, even though his policies and his outcomes were complete failure. The New York and New Jersey had the worst fatality rate in the world, not in the country, in the world, 180 per 100,000 people, which is 3 times the UK. It was dramatic failures there. But his press conferences were really calming and soothing, and he had the PowerPoints and all that. The president,
but nobody's talking about that now, are they? Everybody's talking about how Donald Trump went from playing down the virus to ending up in hospital himself, and that's not a good narrative for him, is it? 4 weeks from an election.
No, playing down the virus was the president maintaining the confidence for the country to maintain the ability to recover from this. Look, it's a challenge for the country, but if you look at what the economic outcome has been, so it's well balanced with addressing the pandemic. That's what leaders do. They maintain a confidence.
But the question, though, Greg, is in the context of what's going on this weekend, is are people thinking that? People aren't thinking that. People are having this conversation this morning about Donald Trump lying in a hospital bed, suffering from a virus that the perception, whether you believe it's right or wrong, is that he hasn't done enough to handle, and he has become a victim of his own actions, I suppose, in that regard. Listen, forgive me, I don't have quite have time to come back on that, but because I want to get to the debate, guys, if possible, and I know that it feels like forever ago, and it also go ahead, Ed.
One thing I'd like to say, while I agree with Greg that I think that Donald Trump's outlook is unlikely to change, that's not the man that he is. One positive, that if there is a positive in this scenario, is hopefully his followers' outlook will change. The president of the United States is tested every day. He's in a protected bubble. He's joked about how much of how focused he is on being clean. He talked about how he washes his hands so regularly, and he still caught the virus. So hopefully now his followers, even if he doesn't, will change their outlook, will start wearing masks, will start socially distancing, will start accepting lockdowns if necessary.
Okay.
And that potentially is the positive that we take away from this, if there is a positive.
Sure. Okay. We'll. I've no doubt we'll have plenty more time to discuss this, and the story develops. Stick with us on Talk Radio as we bring you updates from Washington and on the condition of the president. We'll be keeping a very close eye on it, of course, and naturally on a human level are willing him well. Let's talk about the debate. I mean, well covered. It feels like a lifetime ago, Tuesday night, for all sorts of different reasons. We're going to come on to some of the content in a sec. We don't have a massive amount of time on this, so I want to try and whisk through it as quickly as we can. Ed, I want to come to you though first, because we'll talk about Donald Trump and we'll talk about his interruptions and the issue of the white supremacist group, etc. in a moment. But one of the things that I don't think we haven't talked about a lot, it's been sort of quite lost in a lot of the conversation around Donald Trump's attitude and performance, is the fact that Joe Biden was, at best, quite flat. He failed to land a blow. He sort of stutters and stumbled his way through some sentences. And I was left wondering, Ed, at the end of that debate, Is this really the best that the Democrats have to put up against Donald Trump?
Look, Joe Biden was not a star debater on Tuesday. He's not a star debater. That's not his skill set. His skill set is his empathy and his intellectual approach to politics. And that comes through on his personal contact with people on the campaign trail, which unfortunately we've not got to see a lot of this time round. However, Biden was calm, he was clear, he was coherent, he was everything Trump wasn't, and he presented policies in a manner that people could understand. He might have not been the most polished debater in the world, but while Trump was interrupting and ranting over Biden, losing Republicans and independents, Joe Biden was there to present a calm face, and that's what he did on that debate. And people took away from that one individual on that debate stage looked presidential, Joe Biden, while the other looked like they were
It was basically what Joe Biden is trying to build his campaign on so far, though, isn't it, Ed? And it was uneventful. It was basically uneventful. It wasn't. He managed to sort of slip in and slip out without messing up. I guess more than anything. Listen, I just in the interest of getting to this point, I want to move on. Greg, I want to talk about one of perhaps the key defining moments of the debate and of the night on Tuesday was Donald Trump being asked to unequivocally denounce the white supremacist group True Boys. Here's a clip of what happened.
You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
willing
to
do
specifically
that, but
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. You want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and
Proud
militia.
Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing.
That's Proud Boys as well, by the way. I think I said True Boys. Proud Boys, of course. Greg, look, the Proud Boys have now produced materials where they're waving the flag of stand by. I mean, it has basically energized a white supremacist group. Why couldn't he unequivocally denounce them?
Well, there's a lot of points there. First of all, he did. You saw in the clip that you just played.
Stand by is put them on warning.
Beginning. I'm prepared to do that. He had Chris Wallace and Vice President Biden not acting very coherent, not acting very calm. Both on him at the same time, and so he reacted as best he could in the heat of a moment. But he did say stand down. And let's go back a little bit. The next morning, the London media was obsessing over racism and white supremacy. It was like completely irrelevant to the conversation. There's no. First of all, no one had ever heard of this.
When a group like Proud Boys are told to stand by?
Absolutely.
I don't think that. I think there were plenty of people, Greg, who don't feel that as irrelevant.
Daryl, because the president the week before, maybe 2 weeks before, had declared that Antifa and the KKK, he declared them or indicated, or I don't know.
But he still couldn't stand on that stage. Greg, final point, because I'm late. Final point, because I'm late for the news. He still couldn't stand on that stage and said, "Stop what you are doing."
Oh no, he did say it. No,
stand by.
Stand by. He definitely did. Okay. Look at what he actually said, and no, he said stand down and stand by. And by the way, it's not a white supremacist group. The head of Proud Boys, head of Proud Boys, Florida. First of all, remember, Daryl, the president had never heard of this group, nor had I.
Never mind. Listen, Greg.
Proud Boys, Florida.
Let's not get into defending.
Torrio is black.
Yeah. Listen. Let's not get into defending Proud Boys, because that's not good territory for anybody involved. Listen, we're running out of time, I'm afraid. But it's always a pleasure to do this with you, chaps. Thank you so much for your time. Edward Hardy with us from the Hardy Report. Greg Swenson from Republicans Abroad on a different and actually quite difficult weekend, I think, for the US election and for US politics. Stick with us on Talk Radio. All the latest updates from Washington as and when they happen with the President of the United States, currently in hospital with coronavirus. Our US election coverage continues.